Welcome to Scene, where the art world meets the real world. Every 2 weeks, we sit down with emerging and established artists to offer a genuine glimpse into their lives and minds, all in an authentic and totally straightforward manner. I'm Carrie Scott, your host. And with 2 decades of experience as a curator and art historian, I firmly believe in the transformative power of art, if it's seen. Have you seen Alexis Nunnelly's work? It is so bold. These nude figures, these vibrant colors. It's just all there and unapologetic and excited and vibrant and everything that you want it to be, just like she is in the interview. This is a woman who knows who she is, who knows what she wants, and is going after it. And I was so thrilled to sit with her. Alexis?
Hello, Carrie.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm really so glad that we're doing this. I'm going to admit up front here, you are the first artist that I'm interviewing whose work I haven't seen in person.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
yeah, that feels like a thing and an important thing because
Sure.
your work like jumps out and grabs through the gram. And then I did all the let's go to artsy, let's go. I found some obscure fair you did. And I mean,
my journey is very random. That's for damn sure. I will say.
well, so tell me, how did it go for you?
I mean, oh my God, I don't even know where to begin. It's just like, I guess if I want to speak like broadly, quickly about it, for how I feel from my perspective, because what anyone can say about if they see me from the outside, not really knowing me or my story, it's like, you're like, oh, she's doing it. She has a studio in Brooklyn, yada, yada, yada. And like, to me, I'm just like, I'm constantly like, how do I still get in? How do I do this? Like, I've never had a solo show, like all these things where it's like, I look at my journey now and I'm like, oh yeah, I have been making all this fucking work for like 12 plus years, but it's like, I still feel there's this like lack and inadequacy and like, oh my God, like no one takes me seriously. No one even sees my shit. Like, I don't know anyone. And that's obviously like not ultimately what it's about, but it's kind of like, I feel that internally. And I had someone asked me recently, like, oh, when did you feel like you were an artist? And I was like, I know I've always had that energy and I've always had that drive and I've always been like, I'm fucking doing this. Or I probably wouldn't be where I am today, but I feel like until very, very recently, like in the past few months, I haven't felt like full confidence within myself to be like, I'm doing this with or without acceptance and like accolades and all these things. And then I started to accept more for myself, like, okay, part of the thesis and like concept, not for like the art specifically, but as an artist and a person that's like operating in the world, I'm like, I want to make my practice and my body of work also to help people to like find that confidence, whether it's art, whether it's like, I want to be a chef, I want to, whatever that creative spark is like everyone has it. And so now it's kind of part of my mission to just be like, how do I share my journey from a place of, it took me this long to get to that confident space, even though I was fucking like doing it the whole time. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like in terms of making art, I never like grew up making paintings. I wasn't like painting out of the womb type of thing where I feel like some people are like, oh, my mother, when I was a baby, put a paintbrush in my hand. And I'm like, not really. I mean, I had creative people in my life and my dad's a musician and my aunt's a painter and like, but I also grew up in the Midwest, Indianapolis. I was senior class president and like going to IU to be a pediatric ophthalmologist. And then I was like, I fucking hate all of this shit. And it was just so much of, I don't know what happened or like what part of my spirit finally was like, we got to do something else. But then I just remember like transferring to the art school because I knew I could get a car and like get a job and have I think that there was this like always this sense of like I need more autonomy And I saw people in the painting studios when I went for a visit at this art school, and I was like, oh my God, my people. They're like covered in paint and they're making these like huge ass things. I'm just like, what? It was more like a lifestyle choice. Like I was kind of like, that is how I want to operate, and that's what I want to do with my day. And then it kind of just starts trickling from there, where I have teachers and mentors that are like, look at these. Francis Bacon sat in his studio and painted people. I'm like, oh my God, I want to do that. Like, let's go. Like just weird shit like that. So,
but at what point did you take it from being a lifestyle choice? Your words, not mine. And
yeah.
I'll argue with you against that a little bit, because I think there's a lot more to your work than that. But to it being, you then went on to get an MFA at the New York Studio School. So that's no joke. I mean, MFAs are rigorous and you have to be in it. And
right.
So when did you make that transition? Straight after your BFA, or?
I didn't always think, I mean, again, I was saying like, oh, I had this like sense of autonomy, but I still feel like I carry that, oh, I have to like fit the mold energy into, oh, I have to apply to like Skowhegan and fucking Yale and the Rijksacademy and like all these places that like deep down, I was like slightly in my body, like annoyed at the situation. And I'm just like, and it's like after years and years and years of like getting rejected from these places, it's kind of like, okay, like, do we need to do that? Do I want to do that because that's like what success looks like to the art world? And like, that's what you're sold almost like then like, okay, now I'm a painter and like I'm sold this story of what success looks like, whether it's academic or not. And honestly, I went to grad school to defer my student loans, and I feel like that didn't even work out like I thought it would. So I was like, well, I'm in grad school now. And I also went to the studio school, very traditional. So I did have like it wasn't like super, super conceptual. I mean, it was so much. It was like a heavy workload, and it butted up into COVID too. So that was its own experience. I was supposed to graduate in May 2020. And that just became like, so I'm like writing a thesis paper in like the middle of summer COVID, being like, yeah, I feel like, I guess what I'm saying, like, as I was referencing earlier, that confidence in myself that happened very recently was kind of like a releasing of all of that I'm supposed to do as an artist. And now I'm kind of like, I come to my studio every day and I make up these tasks for myself. So it's like, I don't have to do any of this. Like, it's kind of more like getting back to the root of why I started painting, and like that initial spark when I saw those people in those studios and was like, wow, like, how do we get to that feeling place and like that expressive place and those emotions that can like be transmuted into the work. So yeah.
Why do you think you paint? So the interesting thing from afar, right, is you have these figures, these bodies, that they feel like they sit in a real art history, right? Like they're part of a much bigger story. And then you have these still lifes that feel totally different. Like they feel heavy and like almost sculptural. And then you have works where they like come together. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around like all the pieces and everything I just said. Like, I'm saying that in the best possible way. And that's what I mean. Like,
for sure.
Your work grabs because it's so varied, but all linked.
And I think that's been a frustrating aspect for myself as an artist, where it's like we're living in a world where presenting yourself in a very like streamlined way makes it easier for people to digest. And so it's kind of like, oh, that girl that does that thing that we all know. And then it's like repeating that. And I have people will be like, oh, you could put 50 pieces of Alexis up in the room and it's like they could all feel like a different artist. And like, I'm like, yeah, that's a little frustrating. But at the same time, it's like there's different aspects that it's kind of like And I see it more now as I've been painting for longer, as they start to be placed together, and like it's like weaving them together, and I can kind of see that it's all, to me, I'm like, it's all the same shit. But yeah, I think that's what my journey really is like, how do I, not that I ever want to find an answer, because I feel like I wouldn't, like, why would painting be fun if I wasn't like questioning? Like, that's what makes me paint, is to be like, why one day am I making this like copy of Bouguereau, and on the other day I'm making like a painting of an orgy, and then on the other day I'm painting like the flower vase that my friend gave me, and like, what does all that have to do with each other, and why am I thinking about that, you know? So I think that's why, I guess, to answer the original question, like, why would I paint? It's just like, I love the material. I love the history of the figure, specifically the female figure represented in art history. I love the relationship of the patron and the artist, and like the artist type. That's why I think about that shit all the time. And I just think painting is, it's so hard for us to understand now, but like as a technology, back over all this time where we didn't have photographs, we didn't have all these, you know, I even say like the mirror as a source of technology to like really see ourselves. And so I think painting is just so crazy to study and think about from a conceptual layer like that, but also from a material, like, I'm like, painting is, you go to a museum where I'm just like, oh, God damn it. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, but it's just like the material can be so interesting too. So,
just as a total sidebar, do you know that the mirror is the first case of like international espionage that ever happened? So there was this tiny, crazy. There was a tiny island off the coast of Venice. I think, God, someone's going to watch this and be like, she's still wrong.
Whatever, the fact checking.
Tiny island. Yeah, exactly. Tiny island off the coast of Italy. And it was this well-kept secret of how do you make a mirror? Like, it actually is science, right? It's like, how do you make a mirror?
Oh my God, I love this.
They kept it on the island. And then some people sent some children on a boat, and they shipwrecked the boat on the island and told the children to learn how to do it. And then they rescued the children, but the children knew how to do it. And then everyone got mirrors.
I love that it was children. They were like, it's innocent. They're just going over there.
Yeah.
They're like, get the facts. Wow. Exactly. Okay. See, that's what I'm talking about. It's like these weird, and that's a whole nother, like, that's why I'm so interested in the human mind and like meditation, and ultimately giving people back that sort of like operating the body in a system where it's like all this information and like lack thereof. It's like we're trying to crack it all open. So I love that. I love that so much.
Do you think of your work as being political? No. Okay. Here's why. Let me unpack
Elaborate.
it for you.
I was like, that was such a okay.
Because right, so you are making these amazing large scale portraits of female bodies. You're a young woman. A decade ago, I did an exhibition called Selling Sex in London, and it was all women representing women in that way. Actually, the piece behind me is from that show. I had to buy it because I fell in love with it.
I love that.
But
I love it.
And that was like groundbreaking. We had all this press because it was like, oh my God, women do nudes. And to me, it was like all a bit, I was tongue in cheek about it because I was like, oh, selling sex sells, let's do that.
Yeah.
But then I see you, and I love the way you share on Instagram, and you open up the studio and you open up your thought process, and it doesn't seem political at all to me. This just feels like second nature to you, that you're totally fine with nudes. You're totally fine. Like, even you threw the word orgy away, like, whatever. And it feels totally authentic. And so in a way, it doesn't feel political to me, but it does, given everything that's going on in the landscape of, female bodies, and especially in the States with what's going on with Roe v. Wade, or what went on with Roe v. Wade. That's the context for that question that I just threw at you like a grenade.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's, again, it's like similarly to how I was explaining like why I paint with the concepts about art history and also painting and also the material, there's like two sides, I think, to the way I could answer that question, where it does feel like inherently natural. Like if no one was watching and this is just literally the way that I like operate and what I want to do and the way I want to be. And so it's kind of just like, this is just who I am. I'm like, I want to set up my palette. I want to have this thing. I want to look at images. I want to fucking make like, it's like me in my parents' bedroom when I'm like 10 years old is like, I was doing very similar things and in a similar energy. But I think the more that I think about all of these concepts and these things and the way in which I've lived my life and, you know, previously doing sex work, being in and out of different aspects of, there's a book even that I forget her name. It's called Selling Art and Selling Sex, and how like synonymous. I forget, I'll have to send it to you, but she's a New York based artist. And it's fascinating to me how that's, to be quite transparent, it's like that's very much about what my work is about. And it's like, I think right now, even like I'm saying, it's like, how do I weave together these images of like virtuous art historical presenting like women with their little cupids and like orgies? Like how is that? I wrote my thesis paper in grad school about the translation of the female nude from the inception of photography, like what happened to it when you have these gold framed, all these like patrons, all these men buying these Venuses, lounging nude and putting them in their private collections versus, okay, a photograph starts coming out, like the daguerreotype, and they're like, oh, this is smut. You guys are just got like, half of the like old nude photographs were like, oh, it's mythological, it's fine, it's beautiful. Like I think about those things all the time. And I even was just at the Met looking at the Manet and Degas exhibition, like right before it closed. It was so fucking crowded. And I was like, I gotta get in there. And I just found it so fascinating that the painting that had the most people crowded around it was Olympia. And I'm just like, you know what I mean? I'm like, we're all sitting around like this isn't a thing. And also, I think it's why I take so much imagery from art history, like fashion editorial kind of does the same thing, where it's like there's so much of this sexualized, youthful body presented in a way that's like, it's like the same weird thing where you like go to the movie theater and one of the ads is for like food and you're like, why is this like sexualized? Like, why are you sexualizing this hamburger to like sell it to me? Like, there's like something that like works that people are like, ah, yeah. But so politically, I think about these things. I still feel like I'm figuring out how to even speak about it from a place of like not getting, and I hate to say this, but it's like pigeonholed into being like, oh, she's a woman artist talking about sex. And it's just like, oh God, like I just went to the talk with, it was like Jenna Gribben, Joan Semmel, and Cicely Brown. And they were even just talking about the different layers of, it's like, oh, now we're all in an all women show and everyone, it has to be like presented in a specific way that it's like, oh, God forbid someone's like complex enough that, so I could go on forever about that, but that's how I feel it is politically tied for me, especially in terms of like sexualization of the female body and, just being a woman today where like I don't have to be married to a man to have these freedom. Like I try not to take that for granted right now because I'm just like, it's as crazy as it still is. Like I feel like we're living in a very permissive time in a very new way that, yeah, there's a lot to be said. So
I know I have
figuring out how to say it, like figuring out how to say it. And also it's a very stigmatizing conversation and people have very heavy opinions about things like that.
Yeah.
So
there was an art fair in London this year that was, I think it was called the Female Art Fair or something like that. And I kept being like, this is just bad. Like you're putting women artists in a silo as an aside. And like, I get what the aim is here, but it doesn't feel right. You know,
Yeah.
we need to be part of the conversation, full stop, right? An artist is an artist.
Yeah.
And when you say, oh, I'm so excited to be talking to whoever, you don't say, I'm excited to talk to this male artist whose work is about, like, you never say those words, but you do say, oh, she's this young, exciting painter. And I said it to someone today. I was like, oh, I'm talking to this young, exciting girl who's in, and then I was like, I can't believe you just did that.
You're
right?
Like, fuck, I did it.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm like, I think it's so, I totally like identify with what you're saying, because it's like, it's so ingrained that we don't even fucking notice it. And we're literally women. You know what I mean? Like, it's literally like, it's so ingrained in us. And like, even for years when I was starting to paint, like, I was just like, oh, you know, like, it's just these little things that I'm doing, like my little girly shit. Like, I remember having at one of the first artist residencies I went to back in 2015, like, this male artist came in for a studio visit. And he's like, I don't get it. Like, you're a pretty girl making pretty painting. And I'm just like, back then I was so like, you know, devastated by this comment. But then it's like, now I'm just like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I'm like, I should make girlier shit and like let you guys realize it's just as serious, if not like, that's where it's just like the dismissive quality towards pop. And it's why I paint with, I'm like, pink color, let's go. And then like when you get deeper, it's kind of like, oh shit, like that shit's kind of dark. Like, it's kind of, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, oh, you want me to sugarcoat this for you so you can like come in closer? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It is so ingrained in our thought to be. And I saw a funny TikTok or something recently my friend sent me where it was like, if you replace every time you talk about a woman like that, like if you start talking to men like that, it sounds so dumb.
So dumb.
You're like, oh, this male doctor was like, it's like, oh shit. You realize how dumb that kind of sounds like.
I do. I want to go back to a second for the like, you know, making girly shit that's just as serious and has just as much depth, because I think one of the things that drew me to the work is that like Aristotle quote about beauty being the bait. Like, you are totally, or like a spoonful of sugar, right? You're like giving us something where we're like, wait, I want to see. And then all of a sudden, right, like shadows and weight emerge. And there's a whole thing going on with titles that I want to talk to you about. Because they're so provocative. I can't even get the word out. Provocative. Right. Like, one, I'm just going to say them because they're so good. Like, fresh out of the sea, won't you come taste me? All I'm trying to do is get my feet up from a creek. And it's this figure who's like, you know, she's in this super suggestive pose. But the title is like, why the fuck are you looking at me? Don't look at me like that. All I'm trying to do is get out of this thing. Right.
Yeah. But I'm going to do it really sexually, like, just because you're watching.
Yeah. Because I am a to be
but
looked
I'm
at
struggling. I'm like, bitch, help me. Yeah. It's crazy.
So talk me through the titles. Do you come up with them yourself?
I literally did not. I'm not going to take any credit. They're all pop music. I literally listened to like very, very repetitive girly ass shit. And it's something where they become like meditations and mantras. And while I'm making the work, it's like things that I'm thinking of. And I'm just like, even if it has nothing to do with the way in which I portray it, it just becomes that when I'm like, oh, this is like about this painting. Like, this quote becomes something that then drives the painting. All I'm trying to do is get my feet up off the creek. It's like a Bon Iver song that I love so much, but I just feel like there's some like desperation in that saying that I thought was really nice. And it reminds me of the time I was in Austin, Texas. It was August. It was like 1,000,000 fucking degrees outside. I'm sweating my ass off. My phone had died and I was trying to get like 10 minutes south of the city where I was staying at my friend's house. And God forbid I just like asked to get on the bus, but I didn't. I was like, I'll just walk 45 minutes. So I'm walking down the street. This guy like pulls up his car and is like, hey, how much to like flash me? Meanwhile, I'm like carrying all these bags. I'm sweating. And I'm just like, God forbid you ask me if I like, not that I would get in a car with a stranger, but I'm like, God forbid you'd be like, hey, like, can I help you? Like, are you okay out here? It's 100 degrees and you have no water. Like, those moments where you're just like, dude, like, all I'm trying to do here is get home. You know, it's like, okay, let me just fucking perform for your sexual fantasies. Like, it's it's just one of those things for me that I think titles are literally. I always used to think I was like so bad at titles, and I think that's why I started to just feel like it's fine to name them after like the music. I'm like a lot of of my titles come from the music that I'm listening to because I think I just spin it in my own way. But yeah, I don't know. Fresh out of the sea, won't you come chase me? I just love that one too. Like they're just I'm like I want them to be there's like some weird line when you're dealing with what I feel like I'm dealing with where it's like innocence and then it becomes like, ooh, like where are we going with that? Like but then you're like, oh, it's just innocent. Like it's just the children in the boat trying to get the mirror. Like so and I think there's like that toying and that playing and that kind of like how to it's like a power dynamic. I think about that all the time where it's like, okay, how do I reveal enough? Or even going back to like the ways in which I show up on social media. I had a friend once be like, it's so funny sometimes when you're like, selfie. It's like I'm playing into this character that everyone wants to see and I know what they want to see and I know what they're gonna like. And it's like it's not hard to understand that. And it's kind of like, how do I now be the mirror for that and put it back into people's face with my art? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh my, like so much sense, right? Like I'm 44 years old. I have 2 kids, married, and even a guy friend of mine the other day was like, but you know what you really have to do to get more views. And I was like, really? Right? Really? This is what we're going to, like,
yeah.
He was like, no, just seriously, like the Lycra, when you're on your way back from training, stay in the Lycra and do you're hanging a painting with your leggings on.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not like,
I know. And it's fucking crazy. And like, for me, the thing that's even crazy too is like, I literally am always trying to be naked. I'm always trying to be in my fucking like workout. Like that's just the way that I dress. And that's why I like try to leave New York in the winter. I'm like, I want to be on a beach painting. Like, I'm like, I want to just be in a bikini. Like it feels very genuine to me to do it. But also I think that's just because it's part of my personality and part of the conversation that I'm supposed to be talking about, where it's like, you know, what's it going to feel like when I'm fucking 70 years old? Like what am I going to be talking about in that way? And it's like, the experience is like all I know at this point, but I think it's so, yeah. And right now that's the kind of conversation that I'm talking about in my new series is like the Madonna and the horror. It's like, that's where the art history and it's like, there's only these options. And even, I don't know, like you look at fucking like Kim Kardashian or something, it's like she's a mom, she's a mogul, she has like, but she's like presenting herself in this specific way. And it's now creating the culture around not only beauty standards, but also just like the way in which people feel they need to be as a woman or like as a feminine expression. And it's been crazy to me too, because I have a sibling that's transitioning and just like hearing her speak about like I just don't even know how to be like what is feminine, and I'm just like, oh my god, like what is femininity? I'm like, what does that even mean? Like again, it goes back to just having all this programming. Like there are things where it's like, am I doing that because like I care about it, or am I doing that because I need to be consumed in a specific way for people to think that I'm something? So I think that's just where I'm at now, where it's like, how do I use my art to kind of talk about all these things? So
it definitely feels,
I hear you.
It feels really considered, right? Like when you're on Instagram, it feels in a great way, like part of a performative, this is part of the work.
Yeah.
Is that a right reading of it?
Yeah, and I always was thinking about that recently because I've been doing this like social media camp, which is like whatever, just part of me always trying to figure out my business side where I'm like, oh God, I gotta like get better at marketing, learn about copywriting, like all the shit. I'm like, who's my target audience? Like yada yada yada. But it's I don't really think anyone really wants to be showing up on Instagram anyways, but it's like I recognize what creating a community and I think that's why I've been a little bit more vocal about my emotions because for so long I was like, oh, art world, residency, I'm serious. Like, nobody gets me. Like, the more mysterious I am, like, people will take me more. Like, I'm just like, no one's going to come to my studio and knock on the door and be like, hey, what's going on in here? Like, and I guess what I was saying earlier, like going back to recognizing that part of my journey feels very much like it's not for those people in the art world. Like a lot of my Instagram now, I feel like I'm transitioning into this place where it's like, okay, me 10 years ago, like, how do I talk to her? Like, how do I get to the girl that needed that confidence to get to where I am now and kind of close that gap for people, whether it's like they want to be an artist or not. But yeah, it's definitely a performance. I think about it like that in a weird way. I don't know if it has to be a bad thing, but I think it is an extension of the work and the conversation. And I'm pretty conscious about like, okay, now even like, how do you tell a story, like using those images? Like, what are the images I'm even putting out from my studio? And like, how am I framing that? So sometimes it's like, okay, that's a whole nother even project to like be showing up on social media in that way. So it can be exhausting. I'm like, I just want to paint.
I mean, I think every artist at the moment feels that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think the clever thing is incorporating it into your practice, which is what it feels like you're doing. Like it's super authentic and you're in the studio. And they all kind of feel like they're part of the same conversation. I want to talk a little bit about the sculptures or the more sculptural stuff.
Okay.
Because I think it is wild that like in a piece like Anchor that has soil in it, the sculptures of phones. I want you to explain those and the pots, like the plant pots that are sculptures, right?
Yeah. So that honestly, I'm always thinking about the chaos of nature. I'm obsessed with like Rococo, and I love the way in which they kind of have this like chaos sort of like actualizes itself energy, or like you have a beautiful estate and they would like architecturally put the view of like nature. It's like that, what's it called when it's like there's like the painting of the man like staring into this like billowing ocean. It's like the
Casper Freak,
the overcome
sublime.
Yeah, like that sublime, like that sort of like that energy. And so I always look at, and I think that's very much my process with painting, where it's like everything's kind of whirling around and feeling like very chaotic. But at the end, I trust that it kind of actualizes into what it needs to be. And I'm always like repurposing, like recycling, composting old paintings into new paintings, cutting things up. And so the plants, it was really very much in COVID when I started being like, oh my God, gardening. And I had like a shit ton of plants. And I was like, I want to put these into paintings. And I just thought about the idea of like tending to a painting and taking care of a painting. Because I feel like for me, some of the most successful paintings or the coolest paintings or whatever you want to call it, it's like why I would buy a painting is because it opens up over time. And I feel like you could live with a painting for like 30 years and one day you're just like, maybe the light hits it in a specific way, or like you see something you've never seen before. And I think that's what's so magical to me about painting is like, yeah, I can have this reading automatically, but then you're like, oh my God, like they're not these like static images and they can like transform the meaning. So all those thoughts were happening. I was like, what would it look like to like water a painting and take care of a painting and, building something or building a painting that has soil in it that I'm like, oh God, like that canvas is going to disintegrate. but the art world tells me I need to have something that lasts forever. And like, that was interesting to me, where I'm like testing these bags of soil on my apartment scaffolding and like painting them and watering them, and they're like all bursting at the bottom. And I'm like, oh God, like these are so not something I could ever, not that I really think about like selling as a point, but it was a conversation to be like, oh, like I already make kind of like scrappy things, and this is like even more scrappy than that would be. So yeah, I even like when I first got this studio, I have like a big window and I was like gardening, but it's like my delusion of being like a gardener in New York is I had to like give it up a little bit. I was like, I can't be seeding. I had like 50,000 seeds in my studio 2 years ago, and I was like, so someday, like I love plants and I love nature and the way that they like grow. And even living in New York and seeing like a sprout that pops up from the cement, like I'm just like so inspired by that. There's like a resiliency to nature that I think is poetic, and relating that to the portraits and the human spirit are something that I find. So another vein of my creativity, I guess. But yeah, plants.
And abundance.
I love them.
Right. Well,
abundance. Yeah.
Right. And that comes through in the Rococo, your love of Rococo, because that's so intact there. I mean, my favorite painting as a kid growing up, only because my father used to drop us off at a collection here in London when he had to go see a client, was this Fragonard painting. It's the famous one of the girl kicking her shoe off
on the swing. It's the swing one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's
I think
two men who are looking at her.
Yes.
And when you said Rococo, I was like, oh, that's why I like Alexis's work so much. Of course.
It's so literally like, it's just that like delusional, like frilly, fantastical. There's something so interesting to me about it, because there is like, and even just thinking about that time period, it's like all, I like my favorite fucking movie is Marie Antoinette, because I'm just like, that shit is exactly it. It's like this maximalist I mean, it feels so potent to like what's happening in the world right now, where it's just like this constant progress and like abundance, and when does it fucking like pop? And I think that's like, I love that time period because of that. I'm like, there's like something so crazy where it's just like, when does it fucking pop? Like when is the last blossom? Like when does that, I don't know. And that's where I think that's the like little bit of darkness that I think about, or a lot of bit of darkness that I think about. So I love that. Yeah, Friday 9.
Do you?
So obnoxious, but I love it.
So obnoxious. I mean, and that piece, right? The more I've thought about it as a grown up, where I'm like, but it's actually it's a feminist piece. Like there's the man creeping on her. There's like, right. Like
I forget. There's like, it's like very, I think it's like Susanna and the Elders vibe.
Yeah.
Like where she's like the one bathing and these like men are like peeking. It's like the like, I want to see into this world type of thing that is also fascinating to me.
And she's like, all right, guys, I'll kick my shoe off. All good.
She's like, I'll give you what you want. Like, let's start with the shoe.
Check out my toes. What do you think you kind of like dream your work? Like, is there a moment? Is there a separation between you, the person, and you, the artist?
Oh God. Like, here comes the psychology that I'm always like, There are some things, like I remember when I was really like getting started in painting, or I'd be like smoking weed or something and painting, and I would be like aggressively painting, and I'm like, oh God, I'm like, this is like, I'm like beating this figure. Like there would be times when I'm like, oh my God, or like getting into now where I'm like painting things and I'm like, is this a journal entry? Like, are we talking about like an experience, or are we talking about like other things? I mean, at this point, I'm just like, it's all my fantasies. It's all my realities. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's about climate change. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's literally so because I used to be insecure about that, where I was like, oh, what is the concept and it's like very driven by personal experience and just witnessing what's going on and how to translate it and sort of understand the world. It's the way I understand the world, like where words fail me. It's a way for me to be like, I don't even know what I'm talking about, but it's coming out and it's like subliminal, I guess. Like, and that's why I'm saying like things for me also self actualize, because it's like I might have an idea of where a painting is going or like an image that I'm starting with. But then, like, after the fact, I look back and I'm like, didn't really think about that coming out, but there it is, you know? So it's kind of like, yeah, it can feel like so vulnerable and like deeply personal. And yeah, I kind of accept it now. I'm like, okay, that's just who I am. And I don't know, I'm just like such an open and honest person that to a fault, I have to start to be like, okay, like not like, where's again the line of like, how much do I share about my life that really doesn't matter for people to understand, or what needs to be shared? And that's an interesting conversation too, like how much accessibility to those thoughts and those things do people get to get the point across, or is it just important to be like, these things are very expressive about who I am and they come across with that energy? So
do you have any sort of long-term goals for your work? Like, is there anything that you think, oh God, do you know what? If I did that, then I'm good.
I mean, I don't think I'm ever gonna stop. Is like I don't think I'm ever gonna be like, I'm good. I feel good now. Like, I'm like, sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm like, obviously I have like goals and dreams and everything can always be better. But I think like, damn, like I really am like doing something. Like, I'm doing this and I've been doing this and I have to like give myself credit. But I just think I'm always like, I just want to have a big, beautiful, bright, sunny studio where I can paint and I can invite my community and my friends and have like an energetic space. Like, and that's what I've been trying to do. You know, like I'm getting to a place where I'm like, how do I make my dreams, these like far out dreams that I think are so inaccessible? It's like, how do I like recognize what I have right now and make it happen, even on like the smallest of scales? And so when I mean, this studio I got 2 years ago, and I just remember like getting it and being like, oh my God, like I have a space to bring people. I have my big, bright, beautiful studio. And it's like, those are the things that I try to remind myself now. And like, oh, I want to make a short film. It's like, okay, like what are the baby steps how do I test that Super 8 and just make things that happen? So for me, my like goals, I just want to be able to kind of create that space for people to come to and for me to make art. And I always want to make like film and just like big ass paintings. So I don't necessarily have like a specific thing where I'm like, oh, I want to be on that billboard on that highway, like, you know, or that gallery or whatever. Like, I just think my goal is to have enough freedom to be able to continue to do what I'm doing right now and like reach more people, and also like just build my confidence enough to like sustain what it means and what I'm talking about. Because I do think ultimately there are very important social implications that it's like, how can I be an influence on that? And how can I like show up and not feel like pushed down by this giant wave? Yeah, so it's kind of like finding ways to find the energy to continue with it is really just it.
Man, it's a perfect, honest answer, right? And that's all I could have asked for. I got one more question, and then I'm gonna let you go. And this one is kind of nothing to do with your work, but it subliminally has everything to do with your work. If you could buy any artwork, and I'm asking every single artist this, any artwork, like it doesn't matter if it's an emerging artist, if it's a dead artist, like any artwork, what would it be and why?
Oh my God, that's so hard. Wait. This is the type of question that I'll answer in two ways. Like, first, I feel like for a long time growing up, I never thought about things like this because I was like, oh, I don't have enough money, or like, I don't get to go on that vacation. I don't get to buy new clothes. Like, so I never thought about like what it was. I was always like given things, and I just thought that that's what I accepted. And maybe that's why I paint. Maybe that's why I started like creating my own worlds, because I was like, if I can't have that, well, like, what does it look like if I make my own reality of that? Like, and that's why I make all these like fancy old art history frames. I'm like, what does it look like if I make a faux gallery or whatever? But I think the answer would probably be, I would probably have to have a Bouguereau painting, like a big ass Bouguereau painting. I don't know. There's so many paintings that I'm just like would cry about, but it would be a painting. I bet I can answer that confidently. It would be some sort of painting, but I don't know. I don't want to nail myself in there.
Fair. Totally fair. Thank you. You are a star. Please keep making all the work and doing what you're doing, because it's good. It's really good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is incredible, and I love what you're doing as well. So happy to be here.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Scene Podcast. If you liked what you heard, I'd love it if you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to connect with us between episodes, follow us on Instagram at WatchSceneArt. I'm Carrie Scott, and I'll see you next time. Get it?